titled The Past, Present, and Future of Kwanzaa, applying the Nguzo Saba to become the best possible version of ourselves. Our first panelist, you can unmute yourself, speaking to the origin and foundations of Kwanzaa is Inland Area Kwanzaa Group, IAKG, member Shuja Baker. Shuja Baker is an engineer, freelance writer, cultural study group coordinator, and former member of US, the founding organization of Kwanzaa. He will discuss the foundations of Kwanzaa and his belief that it is elevated and its elevated concept of Blackness would inspire us to change the world if it was fully understood. And Shuja.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Mbaji, and for your very pleasant reading of the Kwanzaa important details and your work and role here as moderator tonight. I want to say, first of all, consistent with our best traditions, I want to begin by asking those who are the elders among us for permission to speak. And if you are an elder among us here, you could do a wave, and I will receive that as your blessing for us to continue. Levedu, just give me a wave, give me a thumbs up.
I can't find the wave, but you have my permission.
Sante for that. Sante for that. Sante for that. The elders have spoken. So I begin by saying again, Habari Gani, what's the news here on this fifth night of the 56th Kwanzaa holiday?
Yeah, purpose.
Indeed, I'm glad to be here to reflect on the principle, Nia purpose, and contribute to this discussion about how we can use the Nguzo Saba to inspire more Black people to become the best possible version of ourselves, to fulfill the task of restoring our traditional greatness as the principle, Nia purpose, calls for us to do. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm a former member of US, the founding organization of Kwanzaa, but I'm a more recent member. I wasn't even alive when Kwanzaa was created, you know. I became an US advocate in late 2005, and I left the organization in 2010. I've continued to be a student of Dr. Karenga's philosophy, Kawaida, since then, and I've been a student of the philosophy now for almost 20 years. I was initially drawn to Dr. Karenga's world-class scholarship and all of the excellent info he packs into his books about Black people. You know, I mean, that's great reading right there, and I'll be discussing some of that today. In addition to his world-leading scholarship in African ethical thought, he is also the author of many widely used books, including Introduction to Black Studies, the most widely used textbook in the country at the college level for introductory Black studies, and the text I'll be quoting from today. As for Kwanzaa, to begin, as Mbaji mentioned, Kwanzaa came into existence during the 1960s Black freedom movement as a bold example of cultural self-determination like the world had never seen from us. As Dr. Karenga says, they didn't ask anybody's permission or seek anybody's approval to create Kwanzaa. They just decided to create a holiday that gives Black people here and around the world an opportunity to celebrate ourselves and reconnect with our culture for 7 days straight. The world truly hadn't seen anything like that before or since. There are a lot of stories about how Kwanzaa came into existence. Today, I'm going to talk about the foundations of Kwanzaa and how it didn't come into existence in a vacuum or as an independent idea. Instead, Dr. Karenga conceived and organized Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Saba as part of a broader structure and system of thought, a social philosophy called Kawaida. In other words, the Nguzo Saba was created before Kwanzaa was created. The Nguzo Saba was created as a communitarian African value system, representing in many ways what Kawaida is all about. Kwanzaa came later and was created to anchor and promote the 7 principles as a way to reconnect us with the greatness of our African heritage and to struggle against the diminished ideas about Blackness in this society. Dr. Karenga defines Kawaida philosophy to be, and I quote, an ongoing synthesis of the best of African thought and practice in constant exchange with the world. And to be honest, it took me almost 2 years to truly understand that definition and fully wrap my mind around Kawaida's meaning, purpose, and potential. Its meaning is the best of African culture, whatever the topic or subject being discussed. Its purpose is to inform and remind as many Black people as possible about our greatness and inspire them to act based on it. And its potential is unlimited because it remains open to constructive critical challenge and calls for current and future scholars to consider ways to add to or revise it in use or as appropriate for the times. As a social philosophy, Kawaida is structured as a multi-layered thought system that could be used to build a new society or to help evolve and elevate an existing society by focusing more of its energies on the best interests of the people. I have a technical mind, I'm an engineer, so the idea of somebody creating a social philosophy was foreign to me. That's why it took me so long to wrap my mind around it. When I finally understood what Kawaida is, though, I got pretty excited about it because I thought it was exactly what Black people need. A balanced set of values or a code of conduct that links our identity to how we live among each other in the world, more so than how we look in the world. A way of understanding ourselves that gives us meaning, purpose, and direction to inspire us toward higher returns in our daily lives. As far back as 1967, Dr. Karenga first stated this. He said, "The central crisis in Black life is a cultural crisis, a crisis of views and values affecting the way we see ourselves in the world and the values that inform the way we engage. That became the central idea behind Kawaida, the Nguzo Saba, and then Kwanzaa. Think about it. The central crisis in Black life is a cultural crisis. To me, that means we have work to do to reconnect more Black people with the best of African culture, thought, and practice. I believe Kwanzaa, the Nguzo Saba, and Kawaida are excellent and important tools in that effort. In the time I have remaining, I want to share what I believe to be the single most significant detail about Kawaida as it concerns this discussion tonight. The single most significant detail about Kawaida as it concerns inspiring more Black people to become the best version of ourselves and restore our greatness is in its elevated concept of what it means to be a Black person in the world. Dr. Karenga explains that in Kawaida, Blackness is a cultural identity, not a racial identity. Kawaida's conception of Blackness is expansive, while the race-based idea about Blackness is profoundly limited, inconsistent, and unclear. The official definition from this government, if you go to the census website or one of the other websites and look up the official government definition of Blackness, you'll find this. It says that a Black person is, and I quote, a person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Well, what does that tell us? I thought every single person on earth originates from the Black racial groups of Africa. Is that right? We also take notice that in that definition, it uses Black people to define what it means to be Black. So what is it really telling us when it offers us that definition? Sounds like confusion to me. To see how inconsistent the race-based idea of Blackness is, do as I've done. Ask a lot of people what Blackness means to them. I started doing that in 2006 when I began helping to coordinate the African Restoration Project, a weekly cultural study group where I coordinated weekly study group sessions in Long Beach and Pomona for over 10 years, y'all. During that time, we looked deeply at what it means to be Black and why we call ourselves Black. In fact, the motto for our study group was this: what you'll do for yourself depends on what you think about yourself. And what you think about yourself depends on what you know about yourself. And what you know about yourself begins with what you call yourself. So who are you? And what does that mean? With that, I spent a lot of time over many years talking to Black people about what Blackness means to us. One of the things I learned was that there is no consistent understanding among Black people about what Blackness means. If you ask 10 different Black people what Blackness means to them, you could get up to 10 different answers. Certainly there will be subgroups among the answers, right? Some will either be based on our swag and style, our athleticism, or our physical status otherwise. Some will mention our African heritage, but very few, if any, will describe what it means to be Black in terms of, for example, our contributions to science or technology or mathematics, principled moral practice, or our capacity for great thought. We're not taught to think of Africa as producing great ideas, Dr. Karanga teaches us. Yet properly understood, Blackness includes all those things because Black people have done all those things before, right? We originated math, science, technology, and those things. We are in fact among the greatest people the universe ever created. Our ancestors and our people have in fact made the most significant contributions to human history. But just living in this society teaches us to forget about all of that. By contrast, the Kawaida concept of Blackness encourages us to see the truth in who we are and have been over the lies the world has been feeding us for centuries. Finally, we see the limitations in the race-based concept of Blackness because in spite of our best efforts, I should say, because in spite of our best Black efforts so far, we haven't yet restored our greatness through that race-based concept of Blackness, right? We've been struggling with that for decades and centuries while hoping for new and better outcomes. Well, I believe the race-based concept of Blackness limits us. First, because the idea is not from us, and it was created for the sole purpose of oppressing us. I believe it limits us because it promotes a diminished understanding of who we are. We all know what they say about Black people in this society, and some of our people believe it. But on the other hand, Kawaida offers us a profoundly elevated and elevating conception of what it means to be Black, what it means to be us. And I contend that if more Black people understand that, they would appreciate it and want to apply the set of values and committed practices. The Kawaida concept of Blackness tells us we're obligated to because of who we are. Now, we must do that if we truly want to restore our greatness. That's because a truly great people is not only aware of their greatness, but they agree to a common set of committed practices that manifest their greatness for the world to see and imitate. We all know the world follows us when we're at our best, right? That's what they're waiting for us to get to be our best again and lead the way. At least that's what we should be waiting for instead of waiting on other people. As a cultural definition, the Kawaida concept of Blackness is grounded in the Kawaida concept of culture. In Kawaida, culture is defined to be, and I quote, the totality of thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates, sustains, and develops itself, and introduces itself to history and humanity. That's a heck of a definition. But not only that, the Kawaida concept of culture includes 7 core areas that include 1, history, whereas Dr. Karanga teaches, and I quote, we must measure ourselves in the mirror of the best of our history and constantly ask ourselves how we can use the past as a foundation to inform, expand, and enrich our present and future. 2, religion or spirituality and ethics, where Kawaida says, we are the ones in the earliest of time who spoke to the world saying, speak truth, do justice, care for the vulnerable, give food to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothes to the naked, and a boat to those without one. This is a tradition we must neither ignore or abandon. The third component of culture in Kawaida is social organization, where our social organization must be constantly concerned with values and practice that affirm and strengthen family, community, and culture. Following the Nguzo Saba, of course, is the prescribed model. The fourth component of culture in Kawaida is economic organization, where in the area of economics, our culture teaches us the principle of ujamaa, which in its most expansive sense means shared work and wealth, rooted in a profound sense of kinship with other humans and the environment. The fifth component of Kawaida culture is political organization. Our culture teaches us to view politics as a collective vocation to create a just and good society and advance human good in the world. Number 6 is creative production, where the best of African culture insists that our creative production or art not only be technically sound, but also socially purposeful and responsible. And then 7, ethos. Finally, our culture provides us with an ethos we must honor in both thought and practice. By ethos, we mean a people's self-understanding as well as its self-presentation in the world through its thought and practice in the other areas of culture. So those 7 elements of culture are at the foundation of the Kawaida conception of Blackness. There's a depth of thought in that goes far beyond what we get with a racial conception of Blackness. This depth of thought in all of these different areas of culture establishes a much more complete and elevated conception of what it means to be Black in the world compared to the race-based concept of Blackness we're taught in this society. The most notable of all is that Blackness in Kawaida calls for Black people to commit to this set of values and practices, the Nguzo Saba, not just 7 days a week, but 365 days a year. That could only benefit us, our families, our communities, and the world by extension if we were to live by those 7 principles every single day. Can you all imagine how things would be different in the world and amongst our people if more and more and more Black people saw ourselves that way? We would not only change our circumstance, we would change the world, because again, the world follows us when we're at our best. So when the question is asked, I should say this too. I'll pass that and just close with this. When the question is asked, what does my Blackness mean? And what will I do for myself and my people because of what my Blackness means? I can draw from the deep well of my culture and the elevated conception of Blackness in Kawaida philosophy to say this: my Blackness means culture, consciousness, and committed practice, meaning that I am grounded in my culture. I am fully conscious of the awesome responsibility I have to my ancestors, my people, and the world because of who I am and what my people have contributed to human history. And I am deeply committed to a values-based set of practices that will guide and inform our steps along the way to restoring our traditional greatness, as the 5th principle, Nia, purpose, calls on us to do. This is our task, and it is nothing short of that. I want to say Asante Sana to all of you for listening and close with Hotep, Ashe, Hedi, Amen.
All right.
Thank you, Shuja. Thank you for enlightening us with that.
Asante Sana.
Asante Sana. Thank you. Our next panelist